Hello. It's that special time of year where visitors to the Richard J. Noddy Civic Center can enjoy all the holiday decorations. And in one particular location, the Sterling Heights Upton House, we can use our imaginations to imagine what Christmas was like for the Uptons when they lived right here. Tonight, you're in for a special treat as the Sterling Heights Historical Commission proudly presents a Victorian Christmas walk. So take a break on writing those letters to Old St. Nick, sit back, and enjoy our program.
Hello, and welcome to an Upton House Victorian Christmas walk. I'm Brian Wojciechowski, a member of the Sterling Heights Historical Commission. Today, several of us are going to take you back in time to observe some Victorian-era Christmas customs that were popular when the Upton family lived here in the 19th century. The Upton home was built by William and Sarah Upton in 1867, and they lived here for approximately 24 years. They had 3 sons and 1 daughter. The home was part of a prosperous working farm that stretched for about 136 acres. It was one of the most prominent and beautiful homes in the area, filled with all the latest amenities. Today's walk is going to be a tour of the home, including 10 stops both downstairs and upstairs, and you'll hear a short presentation about Victorian-era Christmas customs at each. Now, if you'll join us, Karen will begin.
Welcome to the Upton House on this special night. Tonight we'll be taking a peek at the Victorian Christmas customs that were in fashion while the Upton family lived here. But first, let's talk about the Victorians. Who exactly were the Victorians? Quite simply, the Victorians were people who lived during the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 through 1901. But Victoria was more than just a queen. She was mother to 9 children, and her sense of style and fashion were very popular and widely imitated the world over. Many people think Victorians were stuffy people, but actually they were festive partiers who loved celebrating and took good form to a whole new level. William Upton, who built this house, was born in Leicestershire, England in 1835, so the Uptons were true Victorians, and Christmas was definitely a Victorian holiday. But just how did the Victorians become so identified with Christmas? Well, it's quite the evolution. The first recorded Christmas was a Christian celebration held much earlier, on December 25th in the year 336. Prior to that, Saturnalia, a pagan holiday of the winter solstice, had already been celebrated for hundreds of years before Christmas. In addition, other versions of Christmas were celebrated well before the Victorian age. But over time, they became a hodgepodge of different festivities. The holiday was celebrated in every way, from a drunken carnival to a religious high holy day. Victorians, however, are credited with giving the holiday an organized, formal, and modern structure that became popular. They also focused on Christmas with a completely new concept: social awareness. Victorians believed that the holiday included an obligation to do charitable works. Although many countries already observed their own versions of Christmas, Germany notably created strong customs, and Queen Victoria's German husband, Albert, brought those traditions with him to England and greatly expanded upon them. Albert and Victoria's celebration formalized the holiday and drew people around the world to want to do the same, much in the same ways. So you can see, the Royal Victorian Christmas created traditions that were strong and lasting. On that note, if you'll move along, Tammy will meet you at the next station.
Hello, please step into the parlor. A very important component of the Victorian Christmas was the decorating. Just about everything in or on the house was decorated. Victorians used evergreen boughs, pine cones, wreaths, holly, mistletoe, fruits, nuts, berries, almost anything from nature to bring the life of the outdoors indoors. The idea was to make the home burst with holiday colors, greenery, and light, but not in the old-fashioned, disorderly way. Victorian decorating was specific, formal, and balanced, with symmetrical patterns. This style was so specific that various publications offered written instructions, not only on how to decorate correctly, but also providing direction on appropriate activities and proper holiday manners. The following was published in Cassell's Family Magazine. Facing the doorway, or in as conspicuous a place as possible, there should be a motto, either of welcome or one appropriate to the season, such as a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, with the crest and monogram of the family on either side. Victorians modernized the celebration of Christmas, but they did so by strongly building on old traditions. One example is Christmas carols, which are actually an ancient custom. Victorians updated the lyrics of carols and made the tunes cheery, but they were careful to keep the spirit of the original songs. Since music was an important source of entertainment in the Victorian era, singing carols became a beloved tradition. Every house had at least one musical instrument, and those instruments could be as elaborate as this pump organ or as simple as a harmonica. Singing carols was a popular family activity, and at Christmas time, Victorians regularly went out in groups to carol in public. By caroling, they collected money to be given to the poor, or sometimes they were the poor. The celebration of the actual holiday took on a quite organized order too. Christmas Eve was generally reserved for church services, while Christmas Day was the most extravagant day of the year. It started with gift giving in the morning and centered on family, food, and fun all day. Victorians set the style for holiday customs that are followed even today. The difference is in what and how they did it. Music, dance, and friends calling took up Christmas evening. Activities included parlor games, such as blind man's bluff, charades, and hand shadows. At night, ice skating and sledding were very popular. And so the party went, often day and night. Doesn't all of that sound like great Victorian fun? There's more to hear at the next stop if you'll move along. Please come closer. Here we have a beautiful later Victorian style tree. But the very first Victorian Christmas trees were not like this. Trees, of course, were freshly cut from the woods, but mostly they were only tabletop style. Cut trees were put into a large bucket of mud and then placed on a table to be enjoyed at eye level. The Christmas tree was the focal point of the holiday home. Prince Albert lavished the royal tree with sweets, fruits, small gifts, and something new and magical, lighted candles on the branches. Everyone wanted to imitate this enchanting look. Homemade decorations of tin, wood, straw, and yarn went on the tree, as well as strung popcorn and berries. Tinsel, a prized touch, originated in Germany and was made from thin strips of beaten silver. Germans were also starting to make elaborate glass-blown and painted ornaments. As you can see, the Victorian tree practically became a work of pop art. Our next stop will be Megan in the kitchen.
Welcome to the hub of activity for the Victorian Christmas. Kitchen preparations began months in advance for the Christmas dinner, which was the largest feast of the year. And December was the perfect time for a holiday feast. The harvest was over, complete and processed. Livestock had been slaughtered, meats were cured. Wine and beer had been made and aged, and fruits and vegetables had been preserved and pickled. And the weather was cold, so the ovens could run non-stop. Fowl was the meat of choice for the Victorian Christmas dinner. Goose was most common until turkey became popular, but swan, chicken, pigeon, and duck were also eaten. And pig's head was considered a delicacy. Mincemeat pie, an ancient dish which originally had meat in it, was updated to be fruitier and sweeter. And wassail was the Christmas drink, a mix of alcohols and spices and cider. Plum pudding was the magical crowning dessert. It had no plums in it, but lots of dried fruit, and it was served flaming. Household chores went non-stop before the holiday. In addition to the cooking and baking and preserving of foods, there was sewing and knitting for handmade gifts. And dye making was done from weeds and fruits and bugs. And of course, a deep cleaning of the house was required to remove any trace of cobwebs before the new year. As you can see, the Victorian Christmas was a complex process with many tasks, with personal touches, and wonderful smells and foods.
3 Victorian-era authors had a remarkable influence on the development of the Christmas holiday. The themes of their stories impressed upon citizens a new Christmas spirit of duty to help those less fortunate. Their messages were that Christmas was not just a time of indulgence, but also a personal calling to be generous to those in need. Charles Dickens' simple but remarkable tale about generosity to others became a beloved tale and continues to be so even today. His book, A Christmas Carol, is credited with not only elevating Victorian customs of the holiday, but also establishing the idea of a holiday spirit as an individual responsibility for each person to help the poor or face dire consequences. Only a few years earlier, American author Washington Irving spent time in England observing their customs. Irving wrote a series of essays exploring class society consciousness and suggesting good works toward those of lesser means. Published as The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, several stories centered on Christmas fellowship and merriment, and went so far as to suggest shared celebrations among nobility and peasants together. Around the same time, an Episcopalian minister by the name of Clement Clark Moore wrote a poem called An Account of a Visit with St. Nicholas, which is now known as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. It was hugely popular, and admirers were mesmerized by the idea of establishing a jolly central character, soon to be called Santa Claus, who would be the guardian overseeing the accountability of behavior as a value for Christmas reward. All of this played into the growth and depth of Christmas as an experience that has continued over time. On that note, if you'll move along to the next station, Joe will meet you and tell you more. I hope you have a most generous Christmas.
Welcome to the upper level of the Upton House. Today, we're going to talk a bit about Victorian Christmas gifts. Gift giving became a well-established custom during the Victorian era. At first, Christmas gifts were small tokens and trinkets for children that were tucked into the branches of the tree at the last minute. Items like wrapped candies, cookies, and mittens were typical. One of the very popular little gifts was the cornucopia. The cornucopia was a handmade cone-shaped holder like this one. It was filled with treats and small treasures and then hung from the Christmas tree. Meanwhile, Victorian-age toys took a big leap forward. Manufacturing was expanding, and toys were created that were more complex, colorful, mechanical, detailed, and elaborate. After a while, gift giving became a bigger part of the holiday, and adults got in on the fun of exchanging gifts too. Christmas shopping became a pastime, and holiday gift buying exploded. Gift wrapping with patterned papers and ribbons became popular as dyes became more vibrant in color. Gifts became larger and store-bought and called for the Christmas tree to become a more central focal point. Full-size trees came into popularity, and they were now placed on the floor. Wrapped gifts were treated like additional decorations that were thoughtfully placed around the tree. Gift giving became a more and more major part of the celebration of Christmas, something that seems to have lasted even today. Time for you to move on to your next station, where Megan is waiting for you. Merry Christmas. I hope you get some very fine gifts.
As Christmas became a more structured celebration with many parts, it wasn't long before it became quite commercialized, and many Victorian ideas helped promote the business of Christmas. One enduring Victorian idea that was commercial was the Christmas card. Prior to 1850, it was customary to write holiday letters to family and friends, recapping the year's events and sending well wishes for the new year, but that was a time-consuming effort. In 1843, British postal official and businessman Henry Cole commissioned artist John Horsley to design a time-saving card with printed greetings. The first cards were expensive and not well received. Queen Victoria, however, liked the idea and encouraged it. In addition, this first Christmas card was considered quite controversial. It consisted of 3 panels. The main panel shows a family raising wine glasses in a toast to the recipient. The side panels show works of charity to the poor. There were to and from lines on the top and bottom, and a generic message of a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. Temperance supporters were enraged over the depiction of a little girl in the foreground receiving a glass of wine from her sister, and considered it an appalling endorsement for drink. When all was said and done, it took more than 10 years, many redesigns, and a special reduced postage rate available only for Christmas cards to finally bring Christmas cards into wide use. Of course, eventually Christmas cards became quite popular, and many intricate and colorful designs emerged, as you can see from these Victorian samples. The very popular Victorian practice of lighting the Christmas tree led to a high demand for candles. By the mid-1850s, candle making had become its own industry. This was a welcome move, since it removed from the home the unpleasant, messy, and dangerous task of making candles. In addition to candles being used for the tree, many more were needed for spin-off celebrations like Advent, Twelfth Night, and Epiphany. The candle market boomed. Although the practice of attaching candles to the tree was all the rage, it was not without its dangers. Generally, candles would be attached to the tree branches with wires or small holders like this one. But candles were usually only lighted on the most important night, Christmas Eve. While lit, individuals would often be assigned to watch the tree to make sure it did not catch fire. Buckets of water and sand were usually placed nearby in case of emergency. Another unique treat was developed out of the Victorians' highly refined sweet tooth, which made candy almost a necessity at Christmas. Confectionery sales soared at Christmas and led to a newly created treat called a Christmas cracker. Tom Smith, a British candy maker, saw candies individually wrapped in paper twists while in Paris. This gave him the idea to create small paper packages filled with sweets that snapped when popped open. He created crackers, and they were very popular. Later versions, like this one, were filled with small gifts. And a paper crown. Eventually, all these customs led to Christmas itself becoming an industry. The Victorians were just the beginning. But enough about that. If you'll follow me, Joe is waiting at the next station.
Come in for a closer look. This is our Sterling Heights Community Christmas tree. Each year we ask families to bring in an ornament with their name on it, place it on the tree. If you haven't done so, you too can bring in one of your family during Upton House Open Tours. A most memorable part of the Victorian Christmas was the establishment of the personage of Santa Claus. His legend goes back to 3rd century Turkey and a monk named St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas was said to have given away his wealth to help others. Over the centuries, this figure became known by many different names, including Father Christmas, Christ Kindle, later called Kris Kringle, Father Frost, Krampus, and more. That image started with St. Nick and was later refined even more by the 1880 drawings of artist Thomas Nast. Soon afterward, St. Nick permanently became Santa Claus. When Clement Clarke Moore wrote the poem A Visit of St. Nicholas, which later became called The Night Before Christmas, the jolly old man who flies a magical sleigh and brings toys to good children became the secular symbol of the holiday. This later printed edition of the poem shows a merging of the two titles as it transitioned, and a well-developed Santa figure is depicted. Well, here we are at your last stop. We're so glad you joined us today. Have a wonderful Christmas.
That completes our tour of the Upton House Victorian Christmas Walk. We hope you enjoyed yourself and learned a few things along the way. Now, we'd like to leave you with a few parting thoughts. Looking out over the backside of the house onto the city campus, try to imagine the Upton farm as it was in the 19th century. Outbuildings stretched toward the area of Stevenson High School. There was a barn with livestock, and Mr. Upton raised sheep for wool, which he sold in his Utica store. In front of the house, there was a huge birdhouse which became a community landmark. Across the road, Mr. Upton operated a fishery out of the Clinton River, and he sold the fresh fish in town. He had an apple orchard in what is now the Dodge Park parking lot. Farms required a lot of heavy work each day. So as you prepare for your own holiday, think about how different it would have been on this land in Sterling Township during the Victorian era. Many foods were raised here and handmade. Travel was by horse on dirt roads. Many chores, such as feeding the animals, needed to be done each day before any celebrations could begin. The work was harder, but the Christmas was wonderful. We hope yours is too. The Sterling Heights Historical Commission thanks you for joining us here today. We hope you come back in person another day to tour our museum here at the Upton House. Merry Christmas.